So welcome back from the break. Hopefully you had a nice time and we got still almost, 70 people on the line. So once again, thanks for the sponsors. Hopefully you have visited their tables. At least I had in very good discussion with talent base guys at least a couple of breaks ago. And then we are ready for the last but not the least presentation. So I would like to invite Josh Dahlberg to join me here in the stage.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Fine, thanks. What time it is there? You are from Detroit.
Yeah, in Detroit. It's 9:30 in the morning. Beautiful sunny day here so far. Yeah.
Okay, we do have the nice weather here in
It's
Finland.
very
I guess
nice.
whole Finland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Josh, you work as a Scrum Master at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
but why did you decide to talk here in ScanAgile about the Motown Records and the music industry?
Yeah, so spent the last 10 years in tech as a developer and then Scrum Master. But before that, I actually owned a record label here in Detroit. And
Really?
yeah, and we actually pressed vinyl records at one of the same plants that Motown used. So I've been on the Motown Museum tour a couple times. One edition before getting into tech, and then once as a Scrum Master with a team that I was on. And then going through it, it was interesting to see going through the museum tour a couple different times and to see now with new knowledge that I possess, the different takeaways from that tour. So the second time through, really understanding more about Motown's role in enabling creators and how they incorporated feedback to create the best product they could. And it just sort of like opened my mind to this discovery and this kind of self-learning of the origins of Motown, but also that of Agile and Scrum, and sort of how they've share a common ancestor if we go far enough back in the history of work.
Okay, so that's the linkage between the Agile and the Motown about their feedback loops and learnings and that kind of things.
Yes, yes. So specifically, and we'll get into it during the talk, but how they use the quality control meeting to discuss some of the recordings for that were created for the week, and offered feedback. And really, as I sort of started to learn more about that process, really started to kind of sound like what we do with sprint reviews. So I thought,
really?
okay, great, let's investigate that further. And kind of what I found was very surprising.
Okay, you at least get me interested a lot, so maybe it's your turn to talk more about the Agile and Motown Records. So
Great, I'd love to. Thank you.
yeah, so let's check that your slides are visible.
Okay, let us see here. Do you see my screen?
Not yet, but hoping to see it very soon. Getting something. Okay, yes, now I see a picture. Okay, thank
Great.
you, Josh. Stage is yours.
All right, thank you, Jenny. And very quickly, want to thank all of the presenters, the organizers, and the sponsors that have made this session possible. I'm very appreciative to share the stage with everybody here. So right, let's end the day with a little bit of fun. We're going to talk the agility of Motown Records. So in doing so, a quick agenda. First, we're going to do a qualitative analysis of Motown's origin and philosophy. Afterwards, we'll spend some time connecting the dots and correlating between some of the Agile principles with some of the practices of Motown Records. Finally, we'll talk through some of the factors that made Motown such a success for its day and the legacy that it continues forward with in the present day. So before we go much further, though, I thought it would be good to first sample a little bit of some of the music of Motown, which we'll do throughout the course of the presentation here. So to start things off, I'm going to ask Mika if he could please share the first song with us. That's great, Mika. Thank you very much. Awesome. So just a little sampling there. If you know anything about Motown Records, that sound is very distinct to Motown and the recordings that came out of Hitsville over on West Grand Boulevard here in Detroit. So quickly, a little history on Motown. Berry Gordy started Motown Records with an $800 family loan back in the late 50s. So he went in asking, from the family lending institution, he wanted $1,000, but Grandma Gordy, she was very tight with the budget and only gave $800. Despite that, from the initial $800 family loan, Motown had 110 top 10 hits from 1961 to 71. This is a time when the format was physical records and radio. The nighttime television was barely a thing. Certainly no streaming, MP3s, CDs, nothing. So it was all in the music that you could sell to customers as a product. By 1966, they had earned $20 million. Adjusted to today's economy, that's $159 million. So just a huge organization for the day for a record label. At its peak, Motown employed 450 people and was also at one point, the largest Black-owned business in the United States. It had a massive footprint, and its impact in the US is truly immeasurable. All right, so before Motown, Berry Gordy actually owned a record store in town. So here's Berry Gordy at the top of the screen, a picture of his record store there as well, called 3D Record Mart. You can see House of Jazz. So Berry Gordy, his first passion was jazz music. People would come into his record store and say, I'm not interested in buying jazz. I want to buy blues records. And Berry Gordy said, we don't sell blues records here, only jazz. As a result, he didn't sell a lot of records and had to close up shop. So unfortunately for him, but that's sort of a lesson I think he learned early on, that valuing customer feedback, to know what it is that they need, and providing products that are of need to a customer. So more on that later. But after the record store closed, he went to work down the street from me here at the Ford Lincoln Mercury plant. And really, his time at the Ford Lincoln Mercury plant and the processes that he saw there were foundational to the processes that would become inherent in Motown Records and the organization as a whole. So that really started to get my gears turning, because thinking, well, more on that later. So really a little bit more than on Motown's philosophy. And really, to best describe the philosophy of Motown, I'm going to again lean on Mika to show us a video from Berry Gordy himself, and let him sort of describe the philosophy behind Motown. So Mika, could you please share the video there? That's great, Mika. Thank you so much. So I'll get back to the slide deck here. So just a lot of great words from Berry Gordy there, and he did such a wonderful job explaining the Motown philosophy better than I could. But things that I take away from that are logic is boss, equals and sharing feedback, atmosphere of safety, right? Vetting marketing need. You heard him say, would you buy this record or would you buy something to eat, right? Knowing your market, reteaming to some degree, where everybody in cross-functional teams, where everybody would play on each other's record, and then understanding people, listening people to know where they're coming from, really an empathetic leader. So those are all things that are still valuable today. And really, when we get back to Motown's philosophy, it hinged on artist development, from things like choreography to clothes that they wore to how people presented themselves to the songs they sung. It was all about artist development. And I draw a correlation between artist development and what we do is with continuous improvement. Also, every week it was songwriters working with studio musicians, singers, recording engineers, business people, all to create the product that would, make the organization money. So that really talks to cross-functional teams. We already heard a little bit from Berry Gordy here on honesty and respect, right? Speaking honestly and respectfully, certainly an important factor in what we do even today. And lastly, got into it a little bit, that quality control meeting, which again, sort of really resembles how we do sprint reviews. The catch with Berry Gordy's quality control meeting was if you showed up 5 minutes late, that door was locked and you were out. So it was very advantageous to not be late and be on time to that meeting so that people could listen to the week's recordings and have a healthy debate about what would be the most successful in the marketplace. All right, great. So with that now, I'm like, wow, these things really resemble kind of that set, but this is decades before the Agile Manifesto was written. So how could that be? So that's where I started to look at what Detroit's connection to what we do today in software development really is. So we're going to go a little back in the time machine here and really look at, so pre-World War II, Detroit assembly lines and flow manufacturing really ruled the day. From that, we fast forward and the Toyota production system, Tachiono, come into be with the help of W. Edward Demings, right? And the large focus on quality there, certainly building upon some of what was laid in the Detroit assembly lines. Again, fast forward a little bit and we get to the Harvard Business Review, the new product development game, right? This really, again, referencing the Toyota production system, then laid the groundwork for what would become Scrum in 1995 when that was authored, leading up to then the Agile Manifesto in 2001. So when I, at the beginning, speaking with Jenny, talked about both Agile and Motown sharing a common ancestor in the terms of, work, I really draw that correlation back in time to the Detroit assembly lines, and where Berry Gordy was on the factory floor and involved in creating vehicles, right? That product that the end customer needed. And really focusing on quality is how that drove Motown forward and really ran that almost like an assembly line, so to speak. All right, so with this information now, what I'd like to do is spend the next little while correlating some of the principles in Agile with some of the practices of Motown. All right, so at Motown, certainly they valued people hearing their music as often as possible on the radio, in the record store, to a lesser extent, right? Because late night television was just coming into the fold, but things like the Ed Sullivan Show. They wanted to get their product in front of customers as much as they could. So when we look at the Agile principles, that really sounds like our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Customers want functionality they can use. Likewise, people want to hear music they can enjoy, and they want to hear new music. All right, so at Motown, they would rework songs to provide a better product until it exceeded expectations. Here we're looking at a picture of Smokey Robinson in the control room of Motown Records. And quickly, Mika, if you would please play the Smokey Robinson and the Miracles song, Track of My Tears. I think that's a good next step then to look at how rework really played out at Motown Records. That's great, Mika. Thank you for that. All right, so a quick story about the song we just heard and Mr. Smokey Robinson here. With that song, first released, sort of not a hit at the time. And the story goes that Smokey Robinson, laying in bed, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, he gets a call from Berry Gordy. And Berry Gordy says, Smoke, the song is just not right. We got to re-record it to make it a hit. Smokey Robinson says, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll be there in the morning. And Berry Gordy says, no, this can't wait. Has to be right now. So poor Smokey Robinson gets out of bed, goes and records the song that we just heard, and it then becomes the hit that we know it as today. So reworking songs, right? Iterating. Certainly something we still do today, but really from an Agile perspective, that to me at least sounds like welcoming changing requirements, even late in development. We know Agile processes harness change for customers' competitive advantage. That is to say, we learn through the course of a project. We learn from releasing software, and we take that feedback and incorporate that into the next version. Similarly, Motown here with this song, released it once, not a total hit. Certainly that's feedback, right, for Berry Gordy that then spurred him to reach out to Smokey Robinson and said, hey, let's re-record this. So something we still do very much today in that vein of iterating, taking feedback, and responding. All right, so at Motown, they wanted to deliver new records frequently, right? That quality control meeting every week sort of informed the schedule of Motown production and their releases. From an Agile perspective, we know that's delivering working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, and certainly preferring a shorter time scale. We know more frequent releases invite less risk and the ability to get feedback earlier in the process. Similarly, for Motown to release more records at a greater frequency allowed them to see what the appetite was for different artists, different songs in the marketplace, and incorporate that feedback into subsequent releases. Okay, excuse me, moving on here. So every week at Motown, songwriters, musicians, and staff would work together to release great music, really, literally, in the same house. So before we go much further, we're looking at a picture of Diana Ross and the Supremes with the Motown writing sort of institution of Holland Dozier in Holland. I would love for us to sample a little something from the Supremes here. So Mika, if you could please help. This is the Supremes, Come See About Me. Perfect, Mika. Thank you very much for that. All right, awesome. So just a little sampling of Diana Ross and the Supremes there. Right, so cross-functional teams at Motown. Really, they knew that was important to getting to the quality control meeting every week. And quite literally, people again in the same house recording music together. From an agility perspective, we know that's business people and developers working together daily throughout the project. Frankly, teams need a proxy to customers in order to fine-tune business logic, other business requests, and frankly, market need. Likewise at Motown, having all these folks kind of under one roof really enabled creators to arrive at the most viable product in their market space. So next here, we heard a little bit in the video of Mr. Berry Gordy talk about friendly competition, providing a platform to create better products. They provided the environment and support necessary that promoted creativity. There was the scaffolding there, right? And then people were then empowered to create the best songs, the best product that they could in that sort of structure. So when we think about that from an agility perspective, that's really speaking to building projects around motivated individuals, giving them the environment and support they need, and trusting them to get the job done. We know that's important in how we do work. If we've ever worked at a place where that isn't true, you know what a grind that can be to not have the appropriate environment or support to get the job done. So recognizing that even back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, Motown is certainly something that made Motown Records successful. All right, moving on here. So at Motown, They believe the most effective way to convey your opinion was in that quality control meeting. The caveat there, of course, like we talked about, is you don't want to be late to that meeting. This was an exchange of feedback, and this one, it should be no surprise that aligns quite nicely with the Agile belief that the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Certainly, the written word can get misinterpreted, and we know that from a solutioning and sharing feedback perspective, even over a video conference chat is more effective than maybe a Slack message at times. So certainly Motown didn't necessarily have to compete with like Slack in its time, but still really I see how they valued that face-to-face communication as an exchange of ideas, much like we do today. All right, moving on here. So frankly, at Motown, hit records were their measure of success. Here we have a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with Berry Gordy. A quick sort of fun fact on this. They're holding up a record here called The Great March to Freedom. People probably know Dr. King for delivering the I Have a Dream speech. What people may not know is that the first time that Dr. King gave that speech wasn't at Washington, D.C., at the Capitol. It was in Detroit. And as a result, Dr. King entrusted Berry Gordy and Motown Records, really a subsidiary of Motown called Gordy Records, to press that speech to vinyl and release that for people to have in their homes. So when I think about a measure of success for Motown, certainly having Dr. King's endorsement to release his powerful words is an indicator of success. Similarly for us, we know that an indicator of success for a team, for an organization, is working software. If it's something that customers are going to use, that's going to delight them, that's certainly an indicator of our progress. All right, moving on. So at Motown, the details mattered, both in presentation and sound, and really they believed it provides more opportunities. What we're looking at here, the image is of the Four Tops with the choreographer Charlie Atkins. They're in the basement of the Apollo Theater in New York, very prolific institution and venue for Black artists. They're going over steps for the show right before showtime. So no rest for the weary here. They were always fine-tuning their approach and believe that it would avail them to more opportunities in the future. So, kind of bringing that back to Agile Principles, that really speaks to continuous attention to technical excellence and good design as enhancers to agility. We know if we aren't adhering to technical excellence on our teams, that we're likely going to ship a subpar product or something that doesn't meet our standards from a quality perspective. Similarly, Motown believed the same, right? The choreography mattered, the style mattered, certainly the music, the notes, everything in those details was critical to building the best product for the market that they could. All right. Also at Motown, simplicity prevents unnecessary work and risk. The Motown sound was the Motown sound because it, for lack of a better word, had some guardrails. They knew that certain tempos, certain key signatures, certain lyrical content were things that were successful for them in the marketplace. So anything going outside of that kind of introduced risk and was likely to not be a success. So Motown realized that they couldn't be everything to everyone. thinking about that in the context of Agile, really, I can't think of anything better than simplicity, right? The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. Again, our products can't be everything to everyone, but we need to focus on things that our products can do very well as enablers for our customers, and certainly still focusing on quality. All right, continuing here. Allowing people to have a voice, and they will come up with brilliant ideas. So we're looking at a picture here of Mr. Stevie Wonder and the late, great Marvin Gaye. Before I tell the story that I'd like to tell on this one, Mika, would you please play the Marvin Gaye song, What's Going On? That's great, Mika. Thank you. So I wish we had enough time to listen to that entire song. Unfortunately, we don't. But really, Marvin Gaye's song there. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. Especially given some of the things happening in the United States right now, as true today as it was when that song was written in response to some of the things going on around the Vietnam War. So quickly, though, a couple stories for Stevie and Marvin on allowing people to have a voice at the table. So Stevie Wonder signed with Motown as a very young person. I mean, teens, maybe even before. And at his 21st birthday, Berry Gordy threw him this very lavish party. It's very nice from what I understand. And the following morning, Stevie Wonder's lawyers paid Berry Gordy a visit and said, well, now that Stevie's 21, we want to renegotiate the terms of his contract. As a result of that and having more of a say over what Stevie Wonder's product would be, that gave rise to seminal albums of Stevie Wonder, like Songs in the Key of Life and Talking Book. So certainly he knew in his heart of hearts, like, that his voice could help propel his franchise of Motown, his product, the Stevie Wonder brand, further. Similarly, Marvin Gaye, with what we just listened to, What's Going On? That album initially was not Berry Gordy's favorite. He thought it was too controversial for the time and was afraid that it would tarnish the Motown brand. Berry Gordy was overruled in that quality control meeting, much to his chagrin, and the album was released. In retrospect, I'm sure he was happy it was, because that record would go on to become, and still to this day, is Motown's most successful release of all time. So I mentioned that as two examples of people who brought greater voice to the solutions, if you will, for their product. And when we look at that from the aspect of Agile, it's really speaking to the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Those closest to the technology of a product are the best ones to make decisions as stewards for that product, right? And we know that self-organizing teams it's advantageous for them to have a say in those architectures, requirements, and designs for what is needed in the marketplace. All right, so that kind of completes our correlation of Agile principles with some of the practices of Motown, but what was it that made Motown successful? Certainly they had a unified product vision, right? The Motown sound is still recognizable today. Democratic decision-making. We heard as much from Berry Gordy earlier in this presentation, where creating an atmosphere of safety and being equals and sharing feedback, and frankly, even being overruled in a quality control meeting on a decision. Really, yes, and that speaks to that atmosphere of safety. Finally, there was never a sacrifice in their quality. They stressed a great deal of importance on the quality of the product that they delivered to the marketplace, and through some examples that we looked at previously, weren't shy about reworking it if it wasn't quite right. So looking at some of those things that made Motown successful, I feel product vision, democratic decision-making, having an atmosphere of safety, and focusing on delivering with quality are as true for us today in software development and the practices that we promote with our teams as it was for Motown back in their heyday. So where does that leave us? Where is Motown now? So it lives on. Despite Berry Gordy having sold Motown Records in 1988 for $61 million, he retained the publishing rights. And as a result, that gives him some wiggle room of things to do in the future. As a result, it's really taken a preservation mindset to really preserve that Motown legacy, and specifically in the city of Detroit, by securing $50 million in expansion funds for the Motown Museum, which you see some of the artistic renderings on the stage here, and even a picture of Berry Gordy himself at the ribbon cutting for some of that expansion. Finally, there's still a focus on quality, even with this pivot into the enhancements, the additions to the Motown Museum. So I encourage everybody to think about some of the things that Motown did as an organization, as if only as validation for what we do today, but also as reminders for us to promote things like psychological safety, embracing feedback, and unified product vision as things that will make us successful as we work with people. So I believe that's about my time here. I certainly want to thank everybody. You can reach out to me here by email. I do encourage everybody to visit motownmuseum.org to learn more. If you are ever in Detroit, please do look me up. You can find me on LinkedIn with the QR code here. Again, thank you all very much, and I really appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Josh. I think many of us think that your music was really good.
Terrific.
It was inspirational. And actually, someone asked from the chat that can we get the names of the songs you played? So I included already there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Replay those myself.
That's great.
So we have questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
So the first one is actually that, okay, do you know any examples of Motown changing something semi-dramatically based on some unexpected success? So were they able to change their behavior at some point?
I think there are examples of that. Certainly at a very micro kind of level with what I described in reworking songs after they were released. So nothing's ever too final, right? But you also see how Motown pivoted to different audio formats, for example, as they came into fashion. Different industries, Motown also got into a little bit of film. Even before that, though, as new technology became available for them to record with, they were early adopters of different things. So it's kind of funny, you know, in that certainly. So I don't know that you can see, but I'm around a lot of music equipment myself, and you know, I take for granted some of the technology that is at my fingertips here. Motown didn't have that luxury, right? Often recording with one microphone an entire band. Eventually, they got the technology to have two microphones where you could record the band and then the singer, right? So certainly as technology evolved, some of the practices of Motown did as well.
Okay. So then we have a question. What can we take back from Motown example to how we create hardware and physical products?
Also a great question. I think some of the things that we can take away from Motown and how it relates to physical products are almost the same as even software. I just think products are products generally, in that responding to feedback, going with maybe a smaller initial offering and getting that in front of customers to then help inform and build out what that direction of that product will become over time.
Okay, maybe the last question. So it seems that Berry Gordy had a significant role in Motown's culture.
Yeah.
Do you know any contemporary Berry Gorder, maybe in large organizations?
Oh, okay. So let's see. Certainly, you know, there are some examples of very almost celebrity type CEOs. I don't know that. So I have a little bit of bias at play here, right? Because of being from Detroit and such pride, but I don't know that there will ever be another Berry Gordy, frankly. But I think we can all strive to be leaders in the same vein that that he was and really still is, as Motown kind of changes its direction for the future.
Yeah, definitely. At least he was really far away in the future by his time. Okay, thank you, Josh. Thank you for very inspirational speech. I
Thank
think
you.
we all agree this one. So
All right.
thank you.